Have you ever noticed how the world treats the nice guy? The one who tries to be agreeable, polite, unthreatening? He's usually the one overlooked, stepped on, or pushed aside. Meanwhile, the cold and calculating, the ones who seem fearless, climb higher and higher. Why is that? Because fear rules everything. Fear doesn't just live inside you, it controls you. And if you let it, it decides your entire life before you even realize it. Think about it. Fear isn't just a feeling, it's a chain. It wraps itself around your decisions, your words, even your silence. The moment you fear someone, you hand them invisible authority. They don't have to raise a finger. They don't have to say a word. Your own mind does the work for them. You start adjusting yourself, your choices, your posture, even the way you speak around their shadow. That's not strength. That's surrender. And here's the tragedy. Most men don't even know they've already surrendered. They walk around looking strong, sounding confident, acting like they're in control. But fear leaks out in hesitation, in the pause before they speak, in the way they avoid confrontation, in the way they seek approval when they should set the terms. Fear turns kings into servants before the game even begins. Now, here's the part most people don't want to hear. Those who don't live in fear, the ones who've stripped it from their mind, possess a terrifying advantage. Not because they're reckless, but because they see the world clearly. Fear fogs your vision. It makes threats look bigger than they are. It makes consequences feel heavier than they'll ever be. And worst of all, it elevates other people into gods, while you shrink yourself into a subject. You begin to believe they know more, can do more, are more. But they aren't. They're human, fallible, insecure, often just as afraid as you. The illusion of their superiority doesn't come from them, it comes from you. You build it in your own mind, brick by brick, every time you obey your fear. You become the architect of your own prison. And what's the cost? Living in fear means you never live for yourself. Every choice gets filtered through someone else's reaction. You water yourself down, hoping to offend no one, hoping to stay unnoticed. But the world doesn't reward invisibility. It punishes it. Those you fear, they can smell it. Just as animals smell weakness in the herd, people detect it instantly, and they press, they manipulate, they test, they exploit. The man who always backs down, who nods yes when he wants to say no, who avoids offense at all costs, he becomes prey. And here's the brutal twist. The problem isn't them. It's you. Your internal submission is what makes their dominance possible. Worse, fear spreads. The more you show it, the more others learn how far they can push you. They see your boundaries as soft clay they can bend. They see your time as theirs to waste. They see your silence as consent. And you teach them all of this without saying a single word. What happens next? You let the little things slide. You let insults pass. You tolerate lies. You accept betrayal. All because you don't want conflict. But conflict, ironically, is the forge where power is made. If you fear it, you'll never hold it. The truth is sobering. Most of the people you fear aren't stronger than you. They're just bolder. They've trained themselves not to care about backlash, about opinions, about being disliked. That's the only real difference. Boldness creates respect. Fear invites attack. Fear exposes the weak spot in your armor, the hesitation in your voice, the tremble in your step. And once people see it, they press harder, not with compassion, but with calculation. Here's the law of the world. It doesn't spare the fearful. It rewards the one who moves forward when everyone else holds back. The world bows to those who don't bow first. Fairness doesn't govern human life. Force does. Strategy does. And history belongs not to the righteous, but to the ruthless. Think about the righteous man. He waits for permission. He obeys rules he didn't write. He hopes his good heart will eventually be noticed and rewarded. But the world is deaf to quiet goodness. It doesn't hear restraint. It doesn't applaud patience. Morality alone doesn't give you power. It gives you illusions, and illusions make you weak. Now, don't misunderstand. Ruthlessness isn't mindless cruelty. It's efficiency. It's the ability to do what needs to be done without hesitation, especially when others lack the courage. The ruthless strike while the righteous hesitate. And in that pause, in that moral doubt, the opportunity is gone, snatched by someone who never bothered to ask if it was right. In the game of power, hesitation is disease. Those who move without it dominate those still deciding what's fair, and that's why the ruthless win. They wield morality like a tool when it helps them, and discard it the moment it doesn't. The righteous cling to it no matter the cost, and they pay the price with their failure. Here's the paradox that will define your life. People admire virtue, but they follow strength. They cheer for the noble underdog, but they kneel to the victor. They claim to value morality, but in practice, they obey power. If you cling to virtue without understanding this, you'll be outpaced by those willing to act decisively. Because in the end, it's not about being seen as good. It's about being effective. The world doesn't care about your good intentions. It only reacts to your strength or your lack of it. You might believe that patience, generosity, and forgiveness will eventually win you respect. But ask yourself, has it? Or has it only earned you more disrespect, more exploitation, more silent disappointments? When people know you'll always forgive, they test your limits until there are none left. Every concession you make, every time you swallow the insult, every time you let disrespect slide, it doesn't create peace. It creates an invitation for more aggression, more betrayal, more disrespect. You call it diplomacy. They call it opportunity. The predator doesn't respect the gentle deer. It stalks it more efficiently. And the people you deal with, colleagues, rivals, even friends, aren't so different. When they sense no consequence, they push harder. When they believe you won't retaliate, they take more. You think kindness shields you, but it actually paints a target on your back. That's why true strength isn't about constant compassion. It's about boundaries sharper than steel. Strength means refusing to be disrespected twice. Strength means acting with precision when lines are crossed. That kind of posture breeds respect. The kind that can't be faked. The kind that lasts. Because peace built on fear of consequence is durable. Peace built only on kindness is fragile, temporary, and doomed to collapse. There's a dangerous misconception out there that kindness should always be unconditional. But here's the truth. The world does not reward purity. It rewards clarity. And the clearest message you can send is this: I am fair, but I am not soft. I am reasonable, but I am not endlessly forgiving. I give, but I do not tolerate being taken from. Without that stance, your kindness is worthless currency, spent freely by everyone around you, without gratitude. And don't think it's only your enemies who take note. Even your closest friends, your colleagues, your family, they watch how you handle disrespect. When they see you fold too easily, they adjust their behavior. It starts small, a joke at your expense, a minor favor taken for granted, a decision made without your input. Not because they hate you, but because they sense you won't push back. And in that moment, you've trained them to value you less. The irony is chilling. Those who are feared are often more respected, even more loved, than those who are merely kind. Why? Because people trust strength. They trust boundaries. They trust the man who enforces his limits with discipline. That kind of man provides clarity. And in a world filled with uncertainty, clarity feels like safety. Enemies don't respect emotional appeals. They respect control. They don't fear your tears or your words. They fear the idea that you might not react emotionally at all, but with cold, decisive action. That you might remember their offense long after they thought it was forgotten. That when you strike, you won't hesitate. Here's the rule. Kindness without the ability to be cruel is not virtue. It's submission. The lion can afford to be gentle only because he can be deadly. Without that potential, his gentleness is meaningless. Those who have the strength to punish but choose mercy are respected. Those who show mercy because they have no choice are discarded. And when people test you, they don't remember your good heart. They remember your spine. They measure your tolerance. They test your silence. And when they find no resistance, they press forward. The world doesn't stop pushing until you give it a reason. That's why the man who fears no one is so dangerous. He's not reckless. He's not blind to risk. He's not numb to danger. He's simply mastered himself. He's conquered the chaos inside. The greatest enemies you'll ever face aren't other people. They're internal. Pride, insecurity, anger, desperation. Those are the forces that make men weak. Those are the voices that lead to overreactions, impulsive decisions, and crumbling under pressure. But the man who has subdued his inner enemies cannot be manipulated by outer ones. He doesn't flinch when challenged, because he knows exactly who he is. He doesn't bend under pressure because solitude has hardened him. He's faced his failures, his fears, his darkest instincts, and survived. That's where power begins. Not in dominating others, but in mastering yourself. And let's be clear, self-mastery doesn't mean numbness. It means discipline. It means you don't shake when challenged, because your foundation is already unshakable. It means you don't chase validation, because you know your worth without needing applause. It means you're not bribed by pleasure, flattered by attention, or rattled by threats. You cannot be baited, because you have nothing to prove. That kind of clarity is a weapon. It lets you see opportunities others miss. It lets you wait while others rush. It allows you to strike with devastating precision because you aren't clouded by fear or ego. And the result? Presence. The fearless man doesn't need to shout or posture. His stillness carries more weight than the noise of his rivals. His eyes, his silence, his refusal to react, these terrify those who seek to control him. Why? Because they can't find leverage. They can't predict him. They can't own him. Understand this. The man who fears no one is untouchable. Not because he's the strongest physically, but because he's mastered the one battlefield that matters most himself. The man who fears no one doesn't arrive there by accident. He's already walked through fire. He's already faced defeat, betrayal, humiliation, and survived. He's died 1,000 deaths in his mind and rebuilt himself each time. That's why he no longer flinches at the idea of loss. He's learned the truth. The world can break you, but if you know how to rebuild, you are untouchable. This is why his confidence is quiet, but absolute. Not loud, not arrogant, not desperate. Solid. The kind of certainty you can feel in a man's posture, in the way he doesn't rush to defend himself, in the way he waits when others panic. That calm terrifies those who live off manipulation. Because they can't move him, they can't predict him, they can't drag him into their game. Real power isn't about outbursts. It's not about volume or dominance displays. Real power is restraint. It's silence when others demand a reaction. It's patience when others are desperate for you to move. Power is watching everything, reacting to almost nothing, and waiting for the perfect moment to act. When that moment comes, the fearless man strikes once, with such clarity that no one forgets it. This is the highest form of control, self-control. The man who cannot master himself will always serve someone who has. Look around. Most people confuse emotional outbursts with courage. They think shouting proves strength. They think reacting instantly proves power. But really, it proves the opposite. It proves they can be provoked, manipulated, baited. It proves they aren't in control of themselves. Fear often disguises itself as ego. That quick temper, that desperate need to prove yourself, that urge to dominate every conversation, it's not strength. It's insecurity wearing armor. Underneath, it's fear of being overlooked, fear of not being respected, fear of being powerless. But the man who truly fears no one doesn't need to prove a thing. His calm already proves it. He knows that fear is the ultimate leverage. It's how the world controls you, through fear of rejection, fear of failure, fear of isolation. You felt it, those whispers in your head. Play small, or they won't accept you. Stay quiet, or they'll punish you. Don't push back, or they'll leave you behind. That's the system. That's how the majority are kept weak. They bend themselves into shapes just to avoid rejection, not realizing they're rejecting themselves in the process. But the fearless man, he's burned those illusions out of himself. He doesn't ask for permission. He doesn't shrink for approval. He doesn't rebel for the sake of rebellion either. He simply moves by his own code, and that code is unbreakable. Even when threatened, even when isolated, even when everyone else bows, he remains. His clarity becomes his weapon. While others rush, he waits. While others panic, he studies. While others react, he sharpens. He refuses to act from fear, because he knows fear clouds judgment. That's what allows him to see openings others miss, to strike surgically when the time is right. And here's the part that unnerves his enemies the most. He doesn't need to raise his voice. His presence shifts the entire room. The weight of his composure makes others second-guess themselves. They see it in his eyes, in his stillness, in the way he doesn't flinch when provoked. They feel it. The quiet presence of someone who cannot be moved. That's why the fearless are so hard to fight. They can't be bribed because they don't crave what you offer. They can't be blackmailed because they don't fear exposure. They can't be manipulated emotionally because they don't chase approval. They have nothing you can use against them. That's what makes them untouchable. Most people never get here. They spend their lives addicted to validation, hungry for applause, for compliments, for safety. That hunger makes them predictable. It makes them controllable. But the man who kills that hunger becomes sovereign. He no longer asks for protection. He is protection. He no longer hopes for peace. He enforces it by being the kind of man no one dares to provoke. And this is what terrifies the world. A man who has nothing to prove, because he can wait as long as he wants. He can disappear without fear. He can say no without hesitation. And when he finally does act, it isn't noise, it's decisive, final, unforgettable. That's the posture of the fearless. Dangerous, not because he wants to harm, but because he doesn't need to. His strength is felt in the fact that he could. And when he does, it's precise, cold, and absolute. This is the lesson. You weren't born to flinch at the opinions of others. You weren't made to bow for approval. You weren't designed to beg for permission to live as you are. You were made to master yourself, and in mastering yourself, master the world. Because here's the iron law. Power begins where fear ends, and fear ends the moment you stop giving it authority over your life. Kindness is a virtue, but in the world of power, kindness is often mistaken for weakness. People rarely respect the man who always forgives, who always bends, who always takes the high road without consequence. They exploit him. They test his limits. They push until there's nothing left. Every concession you make in the name of peace is really a message. And that message is simple. You can be pushed further. What you call diplomacy, they interpret as softness. What you call decency, they see as permission. That's how the cycle begins. Because predators, whether in business, politics, or even personal relationships, don't honor the gentle. They stalk them more efficiently. The moment someone believes you won't retaliate, they'll disrespect you more openly. They'll demand more. They'll take more. You won't just be challenged, you'll be consumed. This is the cost of unguarded kindness. It doesn't neutralize enemies. It energizes them. It gives them confidence, not because they earned it, but because you gave it freely. You tried to appear good, and in doing so, you appeared safe. And safety is always exploited. But true strength doesn't need to roar. It doesn't need to dominate with noise. True strength is quiet, immovable, unshaken. It's the posture of someone who will not be disrespected twice. It's the calm, surgical precision of a man who knows exactly when to act. This is why fear creates order. People may love you, but love is fickle. It comes and goes with moods, with circumstances, with convenience. Fear, however, commands respect in ways love never can. Fear ensures boundaries aren't confused with invitations. Fear teaches others where the line is and makes them terrified of crossing it. Enemies don't respect mercy when it comes without power. They exploit it. They test it again and again, like hyenas circling a wounded lion. But mercy backed by strength, that's different. That's not weakness. That's terrifying. Because when mercy is a choice, not a necessity, people respect it. Think of the lion. He can afford to be gentle precisely because he can be deadly. His restraint has meaning only because of his potential for violence. Without that, his gentleness is just vulnerability. That's the same law that governs human interaction. A man who can be ruthless but chooses not to be is respected. A man who is merciful only because he has no other option is ignored, or worse, devoured. Here's the truth. People don't admire your good heart. They admire how you respond when they test your limits. Did you fold? Did you draw the line? Did you enforce consequences? That's what defines you in their eyes. Not your kindness, not your good intentions, but your boundaries. And make no mistake, people will test you. They'll test your silence. They'll test your tolerance. They'll test how far they can go before you push back. And if they discover there's no pushback, they'll keep going until there's nothing left to take. That's why fearlessness matters. The man who fears no one is deeply aware of the risks, but he doesn't tremble before them. He doesn't let insecurity or pride or anger cloud his judgment. He doesn't act out of desperation. He acts out of clarity. That clarity makes him dangerous, not loud, not reckless, but precise. Most men, when disrespected, either explode with rage or shrink in silence. Both reveal weakness. Rage shows you can be provoked. Silence without posture shows you can be ignored. But the fearless man, he does something different. He waits. He lets the offense hang in the air. And when he moves with surgical calm. Not to prove himself, not to soothe his pride, but to establish an undeniable boundary that cuts to the bone. That's why enemies fear him, not because he's cruel, but because he's unreadable. You never know when he'll let things slide, and when he'll make a move that shifts the entire game. That unpredictability breeds respect. It keeps people cautious. It forces them to calculate before they speak his name. Even allies notice it. Friends, partners, colleagues, they all adjust to the man who does not tolerate disrespect. Not because he demands respect, but because he embodies it. His presence is enough. His silence carries weight. His gaze alone makes people second-guess themselves. And here's the paradox. The man who is feared often ends up more respected, even more loved, than the one who is merely kind. Why? Because people trust strength. They feel safer around it. They know exactly where they stand. They don't worry about betrayal because they know the boundaries are clear and immovable. So remember this: kindness without strength is pity. Strength without kindness is fear. But strength with the capacity for kindness, that's real power. That's the balance that makes a man untouchable. The man who fears no one doesn't seek to be loved. He doesn't seek to be understood. He seeks only to be undeniable. And when the world realizes it cannot move him, it begins to orbit around him. Before you can stand against the world, you must conquer yourself. That's the first battlefield. The one most men lose before they even step outside. Because fear doesn't just come from enemies, it comes from within. Pride, insecurity, anger, desperation. These are the shadows that whisper in your ear, urging you to overreact, to lash out, to crumble under pressure. And every time you obey them, you hand away your power. But the man who fears no one has already fought these battles. He doesn't confuse ego with strength. He doesn't mistake loudness for courage. He knows real power is quiet, disciplined, unprovoked. He has faced himself, his failures, his doubts, his darkest impulses, and subdued them. That is why he cannot be subdued by others. Understand this: fearlessness is not recklessness. It's not running blindly into danger. It's awareness without paralysis. The fearless man sees risk more clearly than anyone. He feels the weight of threats, but he doesn't bow to them. His discipline makes him steady. His self-mastery makes him dangerous. And that's why he cannot be bribed, blackmailed, or cornered. He doesn't hunger for applause. He doesn't beg for validation. He doesn't chase safety. He creates it. Because the man who doesn't need permission is the man who becomes sovereign. Think of how most people live. They shrink themselves to fit inside the cage of approval. They mute their voice to avoid rejection. They play small to avoid punishment. They build their entire life around fear. Fear of being disliked. Fear of losing. Fear of being alone. But the man who has killed his fear doesn't ask for permission. He doesn't wait to be chosen. He doesn't beg to be protected. He chooses. He moves. He becomes the danger that others tiptoe around. And his enemies, they feel it. They see it in his silence. They see it in his restraint. They see it in the way he doesn't flinch when provoked. That calm terrifies them because it's unreadable. They can't find leverage. They can't predict his next move. And unpredictability is more frightening than any threat. Here's what separates him from the masses. He's already walked through loss. He's already been broken, humiliated, underestimated, and he's already rebuilt himself. That's why he doesn't fear being broken again. He knows how to rise. That's what makes his confidence absolute. Not arrogance, certainty. The kind of certainty you can't buy, can't fake, can't teach. The kind you earn in solitude, in hardship, in silence. The fearless man doesn't chase safety in the approval of others. He creates safety in the discipline of himself. He doesn't seek peace by appeasing others. He enforces peace by being the kind of man no one wants to provoke. He doesn't need to shout, because his presence alone shifts the atmosphere. And here's the secret. His power begins where fear ends. That's the dividing line. While others are still paralyzed by what people might say, by what people might think, by what people might do, he has already acted. That's why he leads. That's why he wins. Because in the end, power does not bow to morality. It bows to will. Enemies will test you until you give them a reason to stop. Respect isn't earned by generosity. It's earned by consequence. The world doesn't wait to recognize the righteous. It kneels to the undeniable. This man doesn't wait for approval. He doesn't wait to be invited. He takes his seat. He sets his code. And that code is unbreakable. He doesn't bend to threats. He doesn't flinch under pressure. He doesn't trade his values for applause. He is sovereign, master of himself first, and therefore master of his world. So ask yourself, how long will you keep shrinking? How long will you keep chasing approval, waiting to be chosen, hoping to be protected? How long will you let fear run your life? You don't need to be loved. You don't need to be understood. You need to be undeniable. That is the path. And it begins with this: fear no one. Not because the world is safe, but because you have mastered yourself. Not because people are harmless, but because you are prepared for them. Not because life will spare you, but because you will not bow to it. The man who fears no one is not without feeling. He is without illusion. He sees the world for what it is, not what he wishes it to be. He knows that power is not granted to the righteous. It is seized by the disciplined. He knows that respect is not gifted by kindness. It is commanded by strength. And when others look into his eyes, they see it. They see the calm of someone who has nothing to prove. They see the stillness of someone who cannot be provoked. They see the presence of someone who is untouchable. That's the final transformation. To move through the world not begging for love, not chasing safety, not fearing rejection, but standing unshaken. To become the man others hesitate to cross. To embody the truth Machiavelli understood centuries ago. That power begins where fear ends. So carve this into your mind. You do not need to be loved. You do not need to be understood. You need to be undeniable. Fear no one, and the world will fear you.